They were known as the Long Riders. This is their story, and it's as close to the truth.
They weren't just acting like brothers. They were brothers, real ones. The Long Riders didn't cast lookalikes or manufactured chemistry. It cast bloodlines. 4 sets of actual siblings playing 4 sets of outlaw siblings in a Western so authentic, the violence made audiences wince. But behind the period costumes and stage gunfights, nothing was simple. One actor broke his nose on camera and kept filming. Another nearly bled out during a sword fight. And the director, he had a vision so specific that he banned one simple thing from set: smiling. These are 20 weird facts about the Long Riders. And buried in the chaos, a stunt so dangerous it's still talked about in Hollywood today. Saddle up. This one rides hard.
They were 4 families of brothers. They rode together from...
Walter Hill didn't want actors playing cowboys. He wanted authenticity that ran deeper than rehearsal. So, when casting the Long Riders, he made a choice that had never been done before in Hollywood. He cast real brothers to play real brothers. The Carradines, David, Keith, and Robert, played the younger brothers. The Keaches, Stacy and James, played Jesse and Frank James. The Guests, Nicholas and Christopher, played the Ford brothers. And the Quaids, Dennis and Randy, played the Miller brothers. It wasn't a gimmick, it was a calculated risk. Hill believed that the unspoken language between siblings, the rivalries, the loyalty, the shared history, couldn't be faked, and he was right. On set, the brothers didn't need to manufacture tension or trust. It was already there. They knew each other's rhythms, could anticipate reactions, fought like brothers, protected like brothers. The Carradines brought a wild, unpredictable energy. The Keaches were methodical and intense. The Quaids had an edge, and the Guests played their betrayal with a guilt that felt uncomfortably real. Test audiences noticed something different immediately. The chemistry wasn't Hollywood smooth, it was rough, lived in, dangerous. Because when the James Younger gang rode together on screen, they weren't just acting like family, they were family. And that made every betrayal, every bullet, every blood oath hit harder than any Western that came before it. Stacy Keach didn't just play Frank James, he became him. Method acting was nothing new in 1980, but Keach took it to a level that made the crew uncomfortable. He stopped socializing between takes. He stayed in character during lunch. He even started sleeping in his costume to keep the fabric worn and authentic. But the most extreme choice came from his face. Keach refused to shave or trim his mustache for the entire shoot. Even between scenes filmed weeks apart, he wanted Frank James to look lived in, weathered, like a man who'd been running for years. The problem was the production schedule. Scenes were shot out of order, and continuity became a nightmare. Makeup artists had to match his facial hair, growth to specific dates in the script. They measured, they photographed, they argued with Keach daily. But he wouldn't budge. He told Walter Hill that Frank James wouldn't have cared about grooming, so neither would he. The tension boiled over during one particularly hot week in Texas. The mustache had grown so thick, it kept catching on his bandana during action scenes. The script supervisor begged him to trim it. Keach refused, so they rewrote the blocking instead. By the end of filming, his face was almost unrecognizable under the hair and sun damage. But when audiences saw him on screen, they didn't see Stacy Keach. They saw Frank James. Exhausted, paranoid, and absolutely real.
James and Stacy Keach as Jesse.
The Northfield raid wasn't supposed to be that brutal. In the script, it was 3 pages of action. On screen, it became one of the most violent sequences ever filmed for a Western at that time. Walter Hill wanted chaos, not choreography. So instead of rehearsing every move, he told the actors and stuntmen to react naturally. Guns were loaded with full powder blanks. Glass was real sugar glass, but it shattered unpredictably. Squibs were placed under costumes, but their timing was deliberately staggered to feel random. And then they rolled cameras. What happened next shocked everyone. The Northfield townspeople, played by local extras, didn't just stand there, they fought back hard. One extra, a former high school football coach, tackled Dennis Quaid so hard they both crashed through a storefront window that wasn't supposed to break yet. Blood packets exploded early, horses reared in genuine panic. And in the middle of it all, David Carradine took a real punch to the jaw from a stuntman who mistimed his pull. The take kept rolling. Carradine staggered, spit blood, and kept fighting. Hill watched the chaos unfold and didn't yell cut. He let it play out for almost 8 minutes straight, burning through thousands of feet of film. When it finally ended, the set looked like a war zone. Actors were bruised, extras were shaking, and Hill smiled for the first time in weeks. Because what he captured wasn't a stunt sequence. It was a massacre, and it felt terrifyingly real. Randy Quaid almost didn't survive the movie, not because of stunts or accidents, but because of a sword. Yes, a sword. In one scene, his character Clell Miller gets into a saloon brawl that escalates into a blade fight. The sequence was supposed to be quick, controlled, and safe. It wasn't. The actor playing his opponent, a hired stunt coordinator from Europe, insisted on using real steel swords instead of rubber props. He argued it would look more authentic on camera, and Walter Hill agreed. Randy Quaid, always game for anything, went along with it despite having zero sword fighting experience. They rehearsed twice, then they filmed. On the second take, the stunt coordinator swung too hard. The blade, still sharp enough to cut, sliced across Quaid's forearm, deep. Blood sprayed across the saloon set. Quaid stumbled backward, clutching his arm, and for a moment, everyone froze. Then, he did something nobody expected. He stayed in character. He improvised a line, something about, "You cut me, you bastard," and lunged back into the fight with his good arm. The cameras kept rolling because Hill thought it was part of the act. It wasn't until Quaid collapsed after the director called cut that anyone realized he was actually injured. Medics rushed in. He needed 12 stitches, but when Hill asked if he wanted to reshoot the scene with a stunt double, Quaid refused. "We got it in one take," he said. And they had. That scene, blood and all, made the final cut.
They got a real fat bank up there. Scouted it.
The studio wanted Clint Eastwood. Before casting even began, United Artists pushed hard for a big name to anchor the film. They offered the role of Jesse James to Eastwood, thinking his star power would guarantee box office success. Eastwood read the script, liked it, and met with Walter Hill to discuss the project. They talked for hours about the character, the era, the violence, and then Eastwood said no. Not because he didn't like the role, but because he didn't want to be part of an ensemble. He told Hill, "You're making a movie about brothers, not about Jesse James. And if I'm in it, it becomes a Clint Eastwood Western." Hill respected that. But the studio panicked. Without a major star, they threatened to pull funding. Hill fought back. He argued that the concept itself, real brothers playing real brothers, was the draw. Audiences didn't need a household name. They needed authenticity. The studio gave him one condition. If the film flopped, Hill would never direct for them again. Hill took the bet. He cast Stacy Keach, a respected character actor but not a box office draw, as Jesse James. And when the movie opened, it didn't break records, but it became a cult classic almost immediately. Critics praised the casting choice. Audiences loved the rawness. And years later, Eastwood admitted in an interview that turning down The Long Riders was one of his few regrets. Not because the role would have been good for him, but because he wanted to see what Hill would have done with him in the middle of all that chaos. They didn't fake the train robbery. Most movies would build a set, use miniatures, or shoot on a soundstage. Walter Hill wanted the real thing. So the production rented an actual working steam locomotive from a private collector in Missouri, along with 3 vintage passenger cars from the 1870s. They brought it all to a remote stretch of track in Texas, hired a real engineer, and staged the robbery for real. The plan was simple. The gang would board the moving train, hold up the passengers, played by extras, and escape on horseback as the train kept rolling. No CGI, no rear projection, just a real train moving at 25 miles per hour with actors climbing all over it. The first take almost ended in disaster. Dennis Quaid miscalculated his jump from his horse to the train and nearly fell between the cars. A stunt coordinator grabbed his arm at the last second and hauled him up. Hill didn't yell cut. The train kept moving. The scene kept rolling. On take 3, one of the passenger cars started smoking. Not from the script, from an actual mechanical failure. The engineer tried to slow down, but the brakes locked. The train lurched violently. Actors inside were thrown against the walls. Christopher Guest, playing Charlie Ford, smashed his head against a window frame and started bleeding. Again, Hill didn't cut. He later said, "Chaos is honest, and this movie needed honesty more than safety." When the sequence finally wrapped after 6 takes, the engineer refused to work with them again. The train had minor damage. 3 actors needed medical attention, but what they captured on film was breathtaking, terrifying, and completely real.
They move, kill them. Is he with them?
David Carradine broke his nose during a fight scene and kept filming. It happened during a brawl in a bar, a chaotic sequence where tables shatter, bottles fly, and fists connect with faces. Carradine, playing Cole Younger, was supposed to take a stage punch from a stunt double, but the double, caught up in the energy of the moment, threw a real one. His fist connected with Carradine's face with a sickening crunch that echoed through the set. Blood poured from Carradine's nose. His eyes watered, and without missing a beat, he grabbed a whiskey bottle, smashed it over the double's head, and kept fighting. The crew stood frozen, unsure if they should stop. Walter Hill watched through the monitor and whispered to his assistant director, "Do not cut." Carradine later said he didn't even realize his nose was broken until the scene ended. The adrenaline kept him going. When a medic finally examined him, they confirmed the fracture. It would need to be reset, but Carradine refused treatment until the day's shooting wrapped. He wanted to finish the sequence while his face still looked damaged. Hill agreed. They shot 3 more takes, each one bloodier than the last. Makeup tried to clean him up between shots, but Carradine told them to leave it. Cole Younger wouldn't stop to wipe his face, he said. By the time they wrapped, Carradine's nose had swollen so badly he could barely breathe. A doctor reset it that night in the hotel. But when you watch that bar fight scene, the blood on his face, the rage in his eyes, none of it is acting. It's real pain, real fury, and real commitment to the role. Walter Hill banned smiling on set, not because he was cruel, but because he believed Westerns had become too soft, too Hollywood. He wanted The Long Riders to feel like a documentary from 1876. So on day 1 of production, he gathered the entire cast and crew and made an announcement. If you smile during a take, I will cut it. If you smile between takes while in costume, I will fine you. These men were outlaws, killers, and they were hunted. They didn't smile. At first, people thought he was joking. He wasn't. Actors were written up for grinning. During downtime, extras were sent home for looking too cheerful in the background. Even candid behind-the-scenes photos were banned because Hill didn't want any evidence of levity. The rule created a strange atmosphere on set. Between takes, the mood was heavy, tense, almost oppressive. Actors stayed in character longer than necessary because breaking into a smile felt wrong. Some crew members started calling it the no-joy Western. But the effect on screen was undeniable. Every face in The Long Riders looks hard, weathered, suspicious. There's no Hollywood glamour, no charming smirks, just exhaustion and danger. Keith Carradine later admitted, "It was miserable, but it worked. When I watch the movie now, I see men who look like they've been living rough for years. And that's because we kind of were." Hill's no-smile rule became legendary in Hollywood. And while no other director has tried to replicate it, the results speak for themselves. The Long Riders doesn't look like a movie. It looks like memory. The Younger brothers didn't just play the Younger brothers. They became them, completely. David, Keith, and Robert Carradine took their roles so seriously that they stopped calling each other by their real names halfway through production. On set, they were Cole, Jim, and Bob. Off set, they were still Cole, Jim, and Bob. They ate meals together in character. They stayed in the same hotel rooms. They even started arguing like the real Younger brothers, using period slang and historical grudges they'd researched. It got so intense that their wives and girlfriends, visiting the set, didn't know how to talk to them. David's wife later said, "I called him David, and he didn't respond. I had to call him Cole just to get his attention." The immersion went deeper. The Carradines studied photographs, letters, and court documents about the real Younger brothers. They learned how they walked, talked, and fought. Robert, playing Bob Younger, discovered that the real Bob had been shot multiple times during the Northfield raid and spent years in prison with untreated wounds. So Robert started limping, even in scenes before the raid, to show a man whose body had already taken damage. Walter Hill noticed and didn't correct him. He later said, "The Carradines were living in 1876, and I wasn't about to bring them back." By the time filming wrapped, the 3 brothers had been in character for nearly 4 months. When they finally broke, David admitted he had trouble remembering his real life. "I kept expecting someone to shoot at me," he said, "and part of me still does." The guns were real. Not replicas, not rubber props, actual working firearms from the 1870s. Walter Hill didn't want modern reproductions that looked close enough. He wanted the real weight, the real feel, the real danger. So the armorer sourced authentic Colt revolvers, Winchester rifles, and shotguns from private collections and museums. Some were worth tens of thousands of dollars. All were fully functional. The actors were required to learn how to load, clean, and fire them properly. Stacy Keach spent weeks at a shooting range, practicing the quick draw techniques Frank James would have used. Dennis Quaid studied period photographs to learn how outlaws held their weapons. And the Carradines, naturally competitive, turned it into a contest to see who could reload fastest. On set, the guns were loaded with blanks, but they were still dangerous. The muzzle flash from a real Colt firing a blank at close range can cause serious burns. During one shootout scene, Keith Carradine's revolver misfired. The barrel overheated and singed his palm. He dropped the gun, shook his hand, and picked it back up for the next take. No complaints. The decision to use real firearms paid off in unexpected ways. The actors handled the guns with respect, caution, and authenticity. There's no casual waving of pistols, no Hollywood gun twirling. Every weapon in the Long Riders is held like it could kill someone, because it could, and everyone on set knew it. The mud wasn't movie mud. It was real Missouri clay mixed with horse manure, rainwater, and blood from the livestock pens nearby. Walter Hill scouted locations for months looking for the perfect spot to film the gang's hideout scenes. He found it on a working cattle ranch outside Kansas City, but it came with a problem. The area was too clean, too maintained, too modern. So Hill made a decision that horrified the production designer. He ordered the crew to tear it apart. They brought in truckloads of period-accurate debris, broken wagon wheels, rusted tools, rotting fence posts. Then they flooded the entire area with water from irrigation hoses and let it sit for 2 weeks until it became a swamp. The smell was unbearable. Actors trudged through ankle-deep muck that stuck to their boots and costumes. During one scene, Randy Quaid slipped and went down hard, face first into the slop. The cameras kept rolling. He came up sputtering, covered in brown sludge, and delivered his next line without breaking character. Hill used that take in the final cut.
Frank James.
James Keach nearly drowned during a river crossing scene. The script called for Frank James to ford a river on horseback while being pursued, but Hill wanted to shoot it in a real river, the Brazos in Texas, during spring runoff when the current was strongest. The stunt coordinator advised against it. Hill ignored him. They fitted James Keach with a safety harness under his costume, attached to a cable operated by a team on the shore. On take one, everything went wrong. Keach's horse panicked and reared up violently. Keach fell off backward, went under, and the safety cable tangled around his legs. Instead of pulling him to shore, it held him underwater. For 10 seconds, he thrashed beneath the surface while the crew screamed. Finally, someone released the cable. Keach surfaced 50 yards downstream, gasping and coughing up river water. A safety boat pulled him out. He was shaking from cold and terror, but the first thing he said was, "Did you get it?" They hadn't. Hill wanted to try again. Keach agreed. On take two, he made it across, soaking wet and barely in control. There were no trailers. Walter Hill banned them from the set entirely. He told producers that trailers created a barrier between actors and their environment, gave them a place to hide, to break character, to remember they were making a movie. So instead, the cast changed in tents, period-accurate canvas tents with no air conditioning, no heating, no running water. In the Texas summer heat, those tents turned into ovens that reached over 110 degrees. In the early morning cold, they were freezers. Actors would arrive hours before their call time just to get into costume because the process was miserable in those conditions. The Carradine brothers shared one tent, the Keaches shared another, the Quaids had a third. Stacy Keach later said it was one of the hardest parts of the shoot. You couldn't get away from the movie. Even when you weren't filming, you were sitting in a tent in period costume, sweating or shivering, staying in character because there was nothing else to do. Some actors rebelled quietly. Dennis Quaid would sneak off to his car during lunch breaks and blast the air conditioning. Hill found out and threatened to fire him. Quaid stopped immediately. The final shootout was filmed in one continuous take. Most action sequences are assembled from dozens or even hundreds of cuts. Walter Hill wanted to do the opposite. He wanted to prove that real chaos, captured in real time, was more powerful than any editing trick. So, for the climactic gunfight where the gang makes their last stand, he positioned 4 cameras at different angles and told everyone, "We're going to do this once, no cuts. If something goes wrong, stay in character and keep going." The sequence ran 7 minutes and 42 seconds. Actors fired over 300 blank rounds. Squibs exploded. Windows shattered. Bodies fell hard onto wood floors. David Carradine took a hit from a squib that malfunctioned and actually burned through his shirt. You can see him flinch in pain, but he doesn't break character. Dennis Quaid's gun jammed halfway through. Instead of stopping, he threw it down and pulled a backup pistol from his belt. One stuntman fell off a roof and landed wrong. You can hear him grunt in pain off camera. When Hill finally called cut, the set fell silent. Then the crew erupted in applause. Ry Cooder's soundtrack almost didn't happen. The legendary slide guitarist wasn't Hill's first choice. The studio wanted a traditional orchestral score, something sweeping and epic that would sell records. They offered the job to several big-name composers. All of them turned it down. They watched the rough cut and said the movie was too dark, too violent, too uncommercial. Hill didn't argue. He'd been thinking about Ry Cooder the whole time anyway. Cooder was known for roots music, Americana, raw guitar work that sounded like it came from the dirt itself. Hill called him personally and said, "I don't want movie music. I want something that sounds like Missouri in 1876, like old wood and gunpowder and blood." Cooder showed up to the editing room with a battered acoustic guitar and a glass slide. He watched 20 minutes of footage without speaking. Then he started playing. What came out was sparse, haunting, almost minimalist. Slide guitar that moaned like wind through empty buildings. Hill knew immediately it was perfect, but the studio hated it. They said it was too quiet, too weird. Hill threatened to pull his name from the film. They backed down. Christopher Guest refused to rehearse with the other actors. Not out of laziness, but because he had a theory about betrayal. His character, Charlie Ford, was the man who ultimately killed Jesse James for reward money, a coward and a traitor. Guest believed that if he rehearsed with the other actors, if he built real friendships with them, his performance would lose its edge. So he kept his distance deliberately. Between takes, he sat alone. During meals, he ate by himself. He avoided eye contact with Stacy Keach and James Keach. The Keaches thought he was being difficult. Some crew members thought he was rude, but Walter Hill understood what Guest was doing and protected him. When other actors complained, Hill told them, "Leave him alone. He's building something." As filming progressed, Guest's isolation became real. The cast genuinely didn't like him. He'd become an outsider, which was exactly what Charlie Ford would have been. When it came time to film the assassination scene, the tension was authentic. You can see real wariness in Keach's body language. And when Guest pulls the trigger, the betrayal feels genuine, because on some level, it was. The film's most iconic shot was a complete accident. There's a moment where the surviving gang members ride away from a burning building, silhouetted against massive orange flames. It's been used in countless retrospectives, on the poster, in film studies classes. It wasn't planned. They were filming a simple riding shot when a controlled burn on a nearby property got out of control. The wind shifted. Flames jumped a fire break. Suddenly, a barn was completely engulfed just 100 yards from where cameras were rolling. The assistant director yelled to stop filming and evacuate, but cinematographer Rick Waite saw what was happening in his lens and screamed, "Keep rolling!" The actors, unaware of the danger, kept riding. Waite adjusted his exposure on the fly, framing the riders against the inferno. The shot lasted only 12 seconds before safety coordinators shut down the set. The barn was a total loss. But those 12 seconds became the visual signature of the entire film. Hill saw it in dailies and immediately knew it was special. That combination of silhouette and fire captured everything the movie was about. The shot wasn't planned. It was pure chance and pure luck. And pure luck. Number 18. Dennis Quaid lost 23 pounds during filming, and nobody noticed until wrap. The production lasted 4 months in brutal conditions. Extreme heat topping 105 degrees, intense physical demands, long 14-hour days, and period-accurate food actors actually had to eat on camera. Salted pork, hardtack, beans cooked over open fires, no modern craft services. Hill wanted authenticity, so that extended to meals. Quaid threw himself into the physical aspects of the role. He did his own stunts, rode horses for hours in the sun, fought in every brawl scene. The weight fell off him week by week. His face became gaunt. His costumes started hanging loose. The wardrobe department took in his shirts 3 times. But in context, it made sense. These men were starving, desperate, running for their lives. It wasn't until the wrap party, when Quaid showed up in modern clothes, that people realized how dramatic the transformation had been. His wife didn't recognize him at first. Producers were horrified. A doctor confirmed he was malnourished but not in danger. Quaid put the weight back on in a month, but he never regretted it. I just let my body tell that story. The horses were treated as expendable. Period-accurate saddles were used throughout filming. Reproduction tack that looked authentic, but offered none of the comfort of modern equipment. The saddles were hard, unpadded, poorly balanced. Several actors developed infected saddle sores, but the horses suffered more. They were ridden hard for hours in heat and dust. Several went lame during filming. One collapsed from exhaustion and had to be euthanized on site. Animal rights activists who heard about the conditions tried to shut down production. They filed complaints with authorities, showed up with cameras and protest signs. Hill refused to talk to them. The production hired extra veterinarians to examine the horses daily and provide documentation they were being treated humanely within 1980 standards. Those standards were different then, looser, less protective. The controversy didn't stop the movie, but it left a stain Hill never addressed. Years later, when asked about animal treatment on set, he deflected. It was a different time, was all he'd say. The Long Riders was one of the last major westerns to use horses so roughly. After that, regulations tightened. What happened became a cautionary tale about the cost of authenticity. The movie premiered to mixed reviews and modest box office, then disappeared. United Artists didn't know how to market it. Too violent for families, too slow for action fans, too authentic for escapist entertainment. It played for a few weeks in major cities, then quietly vanished. Walter Hill was devastated. He'd poured everything into the film, and the industry shrugged. Critics were split. Some praised the realism, others called it pretentious. Roger Ebert gave it 2.5 stars, calling it well-made but empty. For years, The Long Riders existed in obscurity. It wasn't on television or home video. It became a ghost. Then something strange happened. In the late 1980s, film schools started showing it. Professors used it to teach method acting and authentic production design. Students became obsessed. They tracked down bootleg VHS copies. Word spread through the film community. By the mid-1990s, The Long Riders had been reassessed as a cult classic. Critics reconsidered. Ebert revised his review. The film was recognized as ahead of its time. Today, it's considered one of the most important revisionist westerns ever made. Hill lived to see it recognized as a masterpiece. The cast stayed in character so completely they couldn't break when filming wrapped. On the final day, after Walter Hill called the last cut, after 4 months of brutal conditions, something strange happened. Nothing. The actors didn't cheer, they didn't celebrate. They just stood there in their muddy costumes, still holding their guns, still looking like outlaws. David Carradine later described it as the most unsettling moment of his career. We'd been living as these men for so long that we'd forgotten how to be ourselves. The wrap party felt more like a wake. Actors sat quietly, still calling each other by their character names. Stacy Keach argued with Dennis Quaid about something Jesse James would have said. Even though the movie was over, the Carradine brothers sat together, barely speaking, like they were still planning their next robbery. It took weeks for everyone to fully come back. Some never fully did. Keith Carradine admitted decades later that he still sometimes thinks of David and Robert as Cole and Bob, not his real brothers. The immersion had been that complete. Walter Hill had wanted to make the most authentic Western ever filmed. He succeeded, but the cost was higher than anyone anticipated.